Welcome to Straightforward Talk with ATIYA, where there's real talk about relationships and married life, helping you make real changes at the drop of a dime. With your host, ATIYA.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are broadcasting live from the Spice Island of Grenada, and welcome again to Straightforward Talk with ATIYA. I am ATIYA, your host and relationship coach on the line. No question is off limits. We have real discussions about real relationship issues. The responses are not always in a feel-good format, but they are honest, straight to the point, and unpretentious. We're glad that you could join us today. If you would like to chime in to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so while we are live on the air via the chat at the bottom of the page to your right. If you would like to send me a letter or have your question answered via email, those letters can be sent to atiya@themarriagetree.net. Again, to ask your questions now while we are live on the air, you can send it via the chat at the bottom of the page to your right. Now, last week, we started a special discussion with a focus in Grenada, and the topic was how to heal relationship challenges in Grenada, West Indies. And because of the show last week, we have actually gotten a lot of responses. And so today we will continue on with that discussion and also answer some questions that have come in. For our listeners who are not necessarily from Grenada or not listening in from Grenada, Grenada is a small island in the Caribbean with a population of about 100,000 people. Now, there are many challenges here. You have a lot of challenges here, but we are specifically focusing on relationships and marriages. However, in this particular setting, we may get into some other discussions because these other areas impact the relationships and marriages here on the island of Grenada. And so we will get into answering the questions and do our best to get through as many as possible during our show. Now, what I do want to say is Grenada is a young society. Over 67% of the population here in Grenada is 35 years of age and younger. With youth sometimes come irresponsibility, particularly if there has not been a certain educational experience, and whether that education has come traditionally or otherwise, their youth can still have with it irresponsibility because there has not been a lot of life lived yet to be able to provide those experiences. And then when you live in an area such as Grenada, then it's even more difficult if you don't travel to have certain experiences that will expose you to the wider population. Because as we all know, I know sometimes in other parts of the world they may say, well, London is not an island, or America is not an island, or China is not an island. Well, Grenada is an island, but although it is an island, there is a greater world out there. And in order to really survive, it's very important to understand and be a part of the world structure, although you have your structure here on the island. Now, often in other cultures such as this, usually the older would teach the younger. Wisdom teaches the youth, so that over time the youth can develop wisdom with right teaching. But older people can only teach that which they know. And if there is a generational problem that has not been fixed or addressed, the same issues, the same practices will be passed down from generation to generation, and thus you will continue to go through cycles of broken situations. So if you have a problem that is a generational problem, and at some point you do not address that, it becomes a generational problem. I know people in the medical profession will say, well, this particular person is predisposed to diabetes, or this particular person is predisposed to hypertension. The truth is, it's not necessarily that the person is predisposed to it. It's just usually you eat the same things that your mother eat or your grandmother eats, so you develop the same issues and the same problems that they develop. And at some point, if you don't want to continue on having those same issues, then at some point someone is going to have to change the situation and change the behavior. And so that's in essence what we're discussing today, but we are addressing it with relationships. Now, there was a person that I spoke with, a young lady who and I'm putting it a very nice way. I'm not going to put it the way she put it. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. But she made the statement that Grenada is a sex place. And everyone screws everyone here. So you can imagine the word that she used. I'm cleaning it up a lot. But she said that everyone here screws everybody. And this is the reputation that Grenada has. Now, on a professional level, Grenada does have an issue with promiscuity. But again, you're dealing with the younger society. And an overwhelming number of people, rather than commit to a relationship, a long-term relationship or marriage, they end up what we call shacking or living together, or what some people have cleaned it up and make it sound prettier, common law marriages. But they don't necessarily commit traditionally. So there's not as many married couples here as opposed to other places. And that can become a problem. And I think it's important to know that here in Grenada, you don't really have a disparity between males and females. There are just as many females here as there are men. And so when you're dealing with a place that has almost a balance between the genders, ideally speaking, that would seem to be a good place. But unfortunately, because of many other variables and factors, that's not the case here. An overwhelming number of people, again, rather than commit to marriage, end up shacking up or living together. And the rate of teenage pregnancies and broken relationships, incest, and all sorts of type of ills are high here. And these problems exist, but very few people speak up on it. And what tends to happen here in Grenada is they sweep these issues under the rug or under the carpet and never address it. So now what you see is a multiplication of the problems, and you continue to see the same things through generations. But in order to make a change in the condition, you have to expose the fact that this problem exists. And once you expose it, you're able to address it, deal with it, and overcome it. And some of the things here is you have men who will go from village to village impregnating women. And my husband and I was just sitting and having a conversation with another young married couple. And the young lady is, she's actually a veterinarian. And one of the things that when we were talking about the animals, how she talked about, neutering the male dogs here. You can neuter them because technically, they can go from female to female all over, impregnating these female dogs. And you can neuter the one female, but then that's really all you have. But if you neuter these roaming dogs, then that'll kind of really impact the problem greater. Now I want to transfer that into the human condition. You have men here who will go from village to village, getting involved with different women. So there's no commitment to any of them. Some of these women end up pregnant, some of them younger, increasing the children out of wedlock problem, increasing the teenage pregnancy problem, and also spreading whatever diseases or what have you that they may have is spreading. And so that's a big problem here. And, it's important to say that that's a slave mentality. And I'm going to hit on that because it is a slave mentality. And like Harriet Tubman said, I freed 1,000 slaves. but I could have freed a lot more if only they knew we're slaves. Now, when a people have become apathetic to the woes of their community or society, when they become apathetic and have become desensitized to the issues, it's a dangerous place to be, because you don't allow room for growth or for change. It means that you see the issues, but you accept things as they are, even though you know that they're problematic. You don't deal with it. You sweep it under the carpet. But when you accept things as they are, when you shouldn't, you're actually digging further and further into a hole until at some point it degenerates the whole community or the whole village or the whole country beyond repair. And so many Grenadians, unfortunately, become threatened when you have different people from outside of Grenada who come in to help. They become threatened. But the truth is, 85% of the people here in Grenada, and it's no different than around the world, so I don't want the Grenadians who are listening to this American voice to think that I'm just picking on Grenada. This is true in most places. 85% of the people are ignorant and has no sense about much of anything. Yet here in Grenada, tourism is the biggest industry, but if 85% of the people here have no concept of how to even communicate across cultures or interface with international communities, it can become a problem. And so one of the things when we're talking about relationships and marriage here, all of these other issues become problematic and create issues in relating. And so that's what we want to talk about today. We did get a lot of questions in, and one of the first questions that we did get is, what do you think is the number one breaking factor in marriage and relationships in Grenada? And for those Grenadians who are listening, these questions have come from Grenadian people. So I am only addressing the Grenadian people. But the first question is, what do you think is the number one breaking factor in marriage and relationships in Grenada? I want to hit on that question, and I want to really get in detail about that question. But first, I want to let you all know who are listening from Grenada is that this show will, starting in October, the first week in October, the first Sunday in October actually, we will be broadcasting from GTC Radio, and that would be on 90.5 or 89.9. And so the first week in October, the first Sunday, we will be broadcasting on GTC Radio from 4:30 to 5 o'clock. And then we will go live for question and answer between 5 and 5:30. So we will be taking straightforward talk with ATIYA straight to the Grenadian audience, so that Grenada specifically can be able to benefit from what the world is benefiting from. So it's important to say that, because we have a lot of things that we would like to talk about with respect to relationships and marriage here in Grenada, and that is specific to Grenada, but also where other people from throughout the world will be able to benefit. But I do want to begin to answer the question. But before we get into answering the question, again, if you want to chime in on the discussion, you can send us a chat via chat while we're live on the air, which is in the bottom right hand corner of your screen, and I will be able to get that and acknowledge your question or your comment. So what we would like to do is take a brief break, and then we will come back with, what do you think is the number one breaking factor in marriage and relationships in Grenada? So as soon as we come back, we will hit on that topic.
Hi there, this is ATIYA. Relationships are a fundamental part of our lives. And often during the journey, questions arise, and sometimes we need someone to help us see things from another perspective. Straightforward talk with ATIYA allows you to call in to ask the tough questions and get sensible, real, open and honest, straightforward relationship coaching on the spot. I don't give advice, I offer practical solutions for your relationship dilemma. So join me on Straightforward Talk with ATIYA, Sundays from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
You're listening to Straightforward Talk with ATIYA. Real talk about relationships and married life.
Okay, we are back, and I'm going to get right into the question. What do you think is the number one breaking factor in marriage and relationships in Grenada? The first thing is a slave mentality or mental bondage, a lack of re-education and retraining. And number two is poverty. And a big impact is media and entertainment here. There are local programming that's produced. There's no local programming produced that encourages family and marriage. And when you are in a society that does not have a strong support system for family and marriage, then that becomes problematic, because marriage is the cornerstone of family, and family is the foundation for a strong community and society. So in order to have a strong community and a strong society, you have to have a strong family, and every family should have a strong family structure, and traditionally speaking, it comes from marriage. There are a lot of loose interactions and intermingling between the genders, and what I mean by that is a married man or woman may work, and this is just one example. They may have consistent interactions with their co-worker or opposite genders, but then there's no boundaries that are set, and those boundaries are not set because the people are not familiar with the boundaries, and that's an unfortunate thing. And you know, just to give you an example, my husband is from London, I'm from America, and of course, naturally, we're both in Grenada. You know, as people say, if you're in Rome, do as the Romans. Well, that's only to a certain degree. Naturally speaking, my husband will bring his European traditions or what have you here. I may bring the American traditions here, and then of course we may pick up traditions from Grenada. That's a natural thing. But there are some things that are universal. And one thing in a marital situation, it's not cool in any society that I've ever been in, and if you talk to people around the world, it's not cool. So this is not a cultural thing where you would have, just say, men who knock on a married couple's door and they would say, I'm here to see ATIYA. And you know, or not even respect or give homage basically to my husband. And it's a man coming to talk to his wife, but they pretty much dismiss the fact that this woman has a husband, and so they knock on the door, they come by and yell my name. And vice versa. You may have a female that will come and yell my husband's name, or knock on the door and ask to speak to my husband, and then think that I'm being Mako, because that's the term they use here. I'm being Mako because I may say, what do you need? And they may say, well, I'll speak to your husband. No, that's inappropriate. Not only is it inappropriate, it's disrespectful and it's dishonoring the marriage. But the issue is, when you have a society that there's not a lot of marital situations going on, or when you have a society where there is no etiquette or social skills training that would teach the people what is appropriate and what's not, because it's not something that they've dealt with generation after generation. You know, you have a lot of common law things, and because of the high level of infidelity here, it's almost like sometimes an anything go. And it's nothing wrong with that, but in fact it is. It's not socially acceptable, but not only that, it's disrespectful to the union, because when a husband and wife gets married, they're one. It's no longer individual or single mindsets. And I think what happens here in Grenada is, because there is not a strong support system or an avenue where people can understand the etiquette of marriage and healthy relationships, and then you're dealing with a younger society and these kinds of things aren't being taught, then it creates a gap. And so the people are not getting the necessary skills that they need to even develop healthy relationships and marriages. So one of the things that's important is to be able to have programming that addresses the issue. But going back to the question is, what do you think is the number one breaking factor in marriage and relationship? And in truth, it's really the education or the grooming of what's acceptable and what's not, and pretty much what determines or how does one develop a healthy relationship. So, these are things that definitely need to be addressed. There's so much that can be said on this issue, and we could spend an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours to talk about this, but we would continue to have these discussions to really make a real impact. But when a couple gets married, again, like I said, they're one. And if you offend the husband, you offend the wife. If you offend the wife, you offend the husband. But because, again, there's not a lot of strong marital ties, it tends to be a foreign concept. And so as women and men here, you socially speaking, you can't expect necessarily to have this fabulous relationship with this woman if you're a man, and then basically spit on or not even acknowledge the fact that there's a man present. This woman has a husband, and vice versa. This man has a wife. And unfortunately, what happens, it becomes the downfall of the Grenadian people. And also, if that couple is not strong, it can become the destruction of that marital relationship, because then you have people who, not understanding, not knowing, they sow seeds of dissension. And one of the things, being here in Grenada, and again, one of the things that I do is help men, women, and couples discover their own truth for a better marriage or relationship. What happens is, I find on a mass scale, so those people who say, well, I'm not like that, I'm not necessarily talking to you. I'm talking about the majority of the people here. They're not coachable or teachable, and they hate change. So when you speak in general, collectively, about the people here in Grenada, they hate the change. And especially when it comes from what they view as a foreigner. Yet many people who are well-traveled, they understand that the world is a much smaller place. And while cultures may separate certain things, the human experience and the needs of the human being are universal. It doesn't matter where you're born in the world, there are certain things that human beings need. And one of those is to be engaged in healthy relationships. And whether that is marriage or what have you. Now, at the same time, it's very key that men and women are married, because a lot of the conditions that places like Grenada are faced with is rooted in premarital sex. It's rooted in the lack of strong family structures. It's rooted in people not having healthy marital relationship. When you look at, the condition of poverty here, you have a condition of poverty, but when you have a high rate of teenage pregnancy, you're multiplying and reproducing the same issue. When children or young people have babies, so now you have babies having babies, they end up dropping out of school, so they're not able to continue their education so that they can progress and learn the necessary skills to be able to be a major contributor in society. So you're basically reproducing the problem. And usually when you have two-parent households or when you have marriage situations, you cut down on a lot of those factors. And so, it's something to look at. There's not a lot of programs here that cater to married couples or people who are striving to be in healthy relationships. Now, another part of this, another person wrote, Grenada has a very dim approach to marriage and the true essence of a proper family structure. Could that have been a societal issue for many years? And do you think illiteracy is a factor? Now, we are winding down our show, but like I said before, it is a lack of education and training. Illiteracy, has much to do with it. And also social literacy. Grenada, yes, is a small island in the Caribbean, yet again it is part of a larger world. And while other countries are advancing, the relationship between men and women on many levels present a problem here in Grenada. There is also a very large class gap here and not many constructive things to do. And if you don't have constructive things to do, people become idle. And when people become idle, they end up getting involved in antisocial activities. And you know what happens when people, particularly young people, don't know what to do. And again, Grenada has more young people here than elder people. And unfortunately, men and women often here, they have no clear understanding of what is socially acceptable in terms of interaction with one another. So you have a lot of issues that are not addressed here, but if you were speaking in other places, it can be considered sexual harassment and many other things, because there are a lot of situations that happen here in Grenada that really cross a lot of boundaries of what's acceptable. But because there are no real programs to help teach the people that while this may be acceptable here, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the correct or proper social way to be. And people have to be taught that, particularly if they have been reared and grow up where this is lacking. And it is lacking in Grenada, unfortunately. And, people can get upset because we're pointing these issues out. People can get upset because they may feel like we're picking on Grenada. We're not picking on Grenada. We're here to help Grenada. And the only way to help Grenada, we have to start with the etiquette training of people learning how to interface with other people, first of all, and then learning how to interface with each other. We have a lot more questions to address. However, the time today will not permit, but we will continue to tackle this issue in upcoming shows. We'll continue to tackle it. And the only way to change your condition is to change your condition. You can't hate change and sit back and just want something to be done, but then you're not willing to get up off your rear ends and help get it done. So I know another question is, what are some ways that Grenadians can tackle this issue to become more committed, fulfilling, driven, and purposeful, and in so doing prepare the younger generations for a better marriage, family, and relationships? So I'll answer that in a nutshell, and we'll pick back up on it again. But it starts with etiquette training for girls and boys, character education, skills trainings that allows the people to gain access to relevant skills that will help to progress the country. Life skills training that will help young people to develop life skills that will help them to become contributing factors in the economy of Grenada and to learn how to compete on an international level. And all of this is very relevant to relationships and marriage. And really quickly before we close out, you take Karani James. He's a star for Grenada. He won a gold medal at the Olympics. But guess what? He's right now in America. And he is developing himself to grow to a certain level of productivity, to learn some skills. But Karani James may not necessarily come back and give that which he is learning back to Grenada. And if he does, he will probably bring his wife with him. And he's not married. So in essence, what I'm saying is he will probably end up marrying someone who is not Grenadian. And the thing is, you don't want that to happen. You want to be able to educate the people of Grenada so that they can learn how to interface from an international perspective. So I would like to thank my listeners for listening to the show. Thank the producers and the engineers for helping things to run smoothly. Thank Pac DV and Daniel Songs for the music, Dance Zone, and In the Deal. And the show is archived on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/ATIYA, or at www.themarriagetree.net. Also, you can send your inquiries or ideas for future shows and comments to ATIYA@themarriagetree.net. Don't forget to get my book, Purposeful Dating, which is available on Amazon.com. You just type in Purposeful Dating and put ATIYA, ATIYA, next to it. And that will help you to manifest the love of your life through the power of courtship. And that is a book specifically for the Grenadian people. It's for other people who want to end up getting married and have long-term relationships, but it's specifically for the great Grenadian people. Don't forget to join us next Sunday, same time, same place. Stay at peace, stay in love, and see you next time on Straightforward Talk with ATIYA. I am out.
Thank you for listening to Straightforward Talk with ATIYA. If you'd like to talk with ATIYA off the air, visit www.themarriagetree.net, www.themarriagetree.net, or connect with her on Facebook or Twitter. Don't forget to join us next Sunday live from 4 to 5 p.m. Straightforward Talk with ATIYA.